I survived 100 days on a deserted isle in the middle of a huge ocean with very limited resources. Now, the isle may look nice at first, but don't be fooled. Due to who knows what, this isle is home to much more dangerous monsters than usual. So, over the next 100 days, I'll be on this isle trying to survive with the goal of beating the dragon and leaving the isle to find mainland. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing as it helps me out a ton. I began day 1 on the wing of the crashed plane, looking around and seeing what had happened. I then went over to the plane and began chopping up wood from a tree that had punctured through the plane. And after that, I began looking through the seats and overhead bins to see if I could find anything. And after that, I left the plane, made a crafting table and an axe, then killed 2 calves with said axe to get some food going for myself. I then crafted a wooden pickaxe, broke my crafting table, and then I went back over to the impact zone and began mining the stone with my new wooden pickaxe so I could replace it with stone. I then crafted up a shiny new stone pickaxe, shovel, axe, and sword, and I then began exploring the island looking for a spot to set up my base. I needed to find a spot quick because night would be on its way soon, and after a bit I found a spot that I liked near the waterfront, so I began mining down with my shovel and pick. And once night fell, I began making a temporary shelter with some wood to protect me from the dangers of night. I then spent the rest of the night mining for some coal and some iron, and was able to get a good amount though, breaking a few picks along the way. I left my mines on day 2 to the beautiful sounds of mobs dying. I started smelting some of the iron I got last night while waiting for the charged creepers to despawn. I then made an iron pickaxe and started mining out towards the ocean to get away from the charged creepers. But little did I know, they were following me from up there. I then realized I was thirsty, so I went over to an island, got some sand and some wood, and then smelted the sand into some glass and made 3 glass bottles, and drank the water right up, finally drinking water again. Though salty, water is water. I then started to prepare to head back to the main island, making a boat and sailing back, though while heading back I noticed an ocean monument in the distance. I then spent the rest of the night mining for iron and made a pretty handy shield. I again exited my mines on day 3 to hear all the mobs dying. My goals for today was to try and find a sheep for a bed, and to get a stable food source started. I boated over to the impact zone, found a sheep, and was able to shear it and get 2 wool. I then started collecting seeds for a farm and trapped 2 pigs for later use. I then found and made a new friend, taming a parrot and officially having someone else on this journey with me. I'll name him Jim. I then headed back to base to cook some food. After eating, I was going to go look for more wool, but realized the sun was already setting, so I went back to the mines for the night, getting enough iron for a chest plate and a bucket. On day 4, I immediately went to go find that sheep again, hoping to get a bed to skip these horrible nights. Luckily, I found the sheep pretty easily, so I quickly sheared it, then went back to base to start setting up farms for food for the rest of the day. I woke up on day 5 with the best night of sleep I had had in a good while. I was nearly starving to death though, so I quickly went out and killed a few animals to get some quick food, which I started cooking and eating when I got home. I then went down into my mines to continue working on my farms for the rest of the day. Day 6. I decided today to head deeper into the mines to try and get much better loot. My goals were to get some diamond gear, but as I was mining down, I heard lava, so I looked around and found a lava pool. This was perfect as I could get plenty of food from the right biomes in the Nether. I then watched the tutorial on how to make a speedrunner portal, got that done, then made a flint and steel, lit the portal up, and then went into the Nether to see that I was in a wasteland biome. Before exploring, I went back to the overworld to start strip mining for diamonds to see if I could get any before exploring the Nether any further, grabbing myself my first bits of diamonds while strip mining. I later left the mines to see my crop still hadn't grown a bit, so I knew going the Mediterranean route would be the way. I then went back into the Nether and quickly made a shelter around the portal, but just as I was about to start exploring, I started to burn due to the intense heat. This was super annoying as I couldn't explore the Nether at all without burning to death, so I needed a solution. So on day 8, I made a cauldron with a water bucket and went right back into the Nether. I then soon killed a piglin, realizing that I was the first mob that I actually killed in this world. One thing that I'd like to explain though is that the cauldron method didn't work either, and in order for me to survive in the Nether, I needed to get things that weren't obtainable due to the challenge, so I disabled the temperature effect in the Nether using fire resistance. But besides that, I traveled for a bit and soon found a bastion and killed a ghast, getting returned to sender. After that, I crafted some gold boots so I could plunge right into that bastion. I started by bridging right over to the bastion carefully with netherrack, watching for piglins maybe trying to snipe me. Then after that, I went around it, looting it carefully, bridging from chest to chest, mostly getting a ton of iron and gold. While looting the bastion, I had a near close encounter in the center, but luckily using my fast block placing skills, I was able to block projectiles and successfully get all the loot in the bastion. After looting it all up, I went right back to my base. On day 10, I decided to start expanding my base to organize my stuff. I first went and bone mealed some of my crops so I could get some wheat for myself, and soon after that, I began using said wheat to lure in a cow. After that, I spent the rest of the day mining out my base to get some more space, and after all was said and done, I went outside to watch the sun set as I finished a successful first 10 days. Day 11. Today, I decided to go around the island collecting chicken and sheep, first luring in 2 chickens with seeds, and then breeding them together to start getting that going. Then, while luring a sheep back, I noticed a shipwreck in the distance. And if you guys didn't notice already, I decided to remove the Tough as Nails mod as it really wasn't working the way it was supposed to. I started day 12 off by heading over to the shipwreck that I had seen yesterday. I boated over to it smoothly and quickly and took in a really nice view of the isle from there. The isle tends to look really good when you're not in it with all the dangerous monsters. I then looted through the ship thoroughly, getting all the bad loot in there. Then, for the rest of the day, I went around from island to island, even getting another cow and bringing it home with me. But as I got back to base, it was nighttime, so I had to leave it outside for the night. I then started day 13 by bringing that cow back into the base, and then after that, began breeding it with the other cow I had gotten the other day. After that, I finally figured out how to fix the crop issue. The fix was resetting the random tick speed, so I was able to fix that and finally start to ramp up food production. I then excitedly went back down into my mines to collect some more diamonds. I ended up finding a cave with a huge lava pool in it. I then continued exploring and ended up facing off with this weird looking creeper. And I even ended up fighting a skeleton with an iron sword. But after all that trouble, I ended up finding some diamonds, so it was worth it. So I mined those juicy babies up and got a diamond sword and a diamond shovel. And after that, for the rest of this mining trip, I just continued strip mining, getting a bunch of diamonds, ending it off with 34 diamonds. I started day 15 by feeding my cows, then checking to see my crops finally growing. I then crafted myself full diamond armor, then quickly started a sugarcane farm. My goal for today was to get an enchantment table, so after that I began mining some obsidian down in that lava pool. Then once that was done, I went out and collected a bit more sugarcane from surrounding island. And finally, at the end of the day, I crafted an enchantment table. I made a goal on day 16 to try and get a zombie villager so that I could eventually get a trading hall started. But it needed to be nighttime to do that. So while I waited for night to fall on this land, I started clearing some land around the area for my future house. Once I did a bit of that, I began taking down the OG shelter that had helped me survive all the way up till now. Then once that thing was gone for good, I went back to clearing up some dirt around the area. This kept me occupied for the rest of the day, and before you know it, the sun was already starting to set, so I went to prepare myself to get a zombie villager. Nighttime on the Isle was absolutely crazy. There were mutated zombies all over the place. And of course, tons of annoying charge creepers. So I came up with a simple solution: to leave the Isle. And this was the right move, because as I started boating over to that island I was at the other day, there was a zombie villager there waiting for me to capture it. So I quickly dug it underground, and then made a long tunnel from where the zombie villager was over to my base so that I could lure it back. I started day 17 hunting for the ingredients to get a weakness potion. First things first, I needed a brewing stand, but for that I needed blaze rods, so it was time to find a fortress. I traveled across the Nether for a good while, bridging over giant lava lakes, knowing one mistake could end it all. And I had to also traverse over a dangerous and annoying basalt delta. But all trips must come to an end, as I eventually found the Nether fortress. When I got there, the mobs were a lot harder than I thought. But considering I added a mod that makes mobs 10 times harder, I shouldn't be too surprised, really. I quickly went around the fortress, looting a few chests and fighting mobs back, and the loot was kinda mediocre. Eventually, when I found the blaze spawner, I built a giant cage around it to maintain the blazes to stop them from flying away mid-fight. And still, even with this cage, it was horrible. Because of that one mod, the blazes were so strong, and I had to go back and forth so many times to avoid dying. And after a hard fight, with many times coming close to death, I was able to get 15 rods, barely surviving. Then on day 18, while exploring, I found this weird staircase that led to this whole giant underground section of the fortress. I spent a good while down there exploring and looting a bunch of the rooms in this weird area. The loot wasn't too good though, so I quickly returned to base after going through a few chests. And once I got back, I crafted up that brewing stand, and then soon after made a weakness pot. I ended that day throwing the weakness pot at the zombie villager and shoving that golden apple right down its throat. I started day 19 patiently waiting for the villager to cure. I distracted myself by harvesting my wheat farm and breeding my cows. This obviously worked, as soon later the villager was alive once again. After I cured it, I jumped with joy, but the party had to come to an end as it was time to get back to work on the base. I started chopping down a few of the giant trees that were on the isle. These trees were super annoying to chop down. But before you know it, it was day 20 and I was done chopping up the trees and it was time to begin building my house. I picked out a reference image for a design I liked and I started placing down a bunch of jungle logs and stripping them right after. After getting the general shape done for the front, I then made some trapdoors and started working on a bit of the details in the front. And after placing down a few more logs, I went to bed. I then got back up on day 21 and went right back to building my house, placing down a bunch more logs and stripping them again, the usual. Before starting on the roof though, I needed some spruce, so I went back out into the aisle and started chopping down different types of trees to get the spruce wood. Once again, these trees were extremely annoying to chop down. I then spent the rest of day 21 working on the roof of the house. Then soon later, I continued working on the roof into day 22, finishing placing all the spruce slabs down and adding an aesthetical chimney on top of it. I ended up running out of jungle logs way too soon, so before you know it, I was back out into the aisle chopping down a few more trees. Then spent the rest of day 22 working on the back of the house this time. I then began day 23 with the goal of finishing up the exterior of this house. Trust me guys, I'm usually a much better builder than this, but I absolutely suck when I build off the fly rather than planning with trial and error in creative mode. As I said earlier, I had a reference image, but still, that creative mode step is absolutely crucial for making a good build. But by the end of day 23, I had an exterior finished. And finally, on day 24, I began digging out the grass inside the house, replacing it with a sleek and modern jungle plank hardwood floor. Once the floor was done, I went over to the tower section and started making a staircase in that section to go to the top. Once at the top, I made a little observation area up there. And finally, at the end of the day, I started adding in all the little details to the exterior. I started day 25 by adding the last few touches along the outside of the house. Once the house was done, I went down to the bunker section and spent days 25 to 30 doing tons of work. I first started mining out the original staircase down here, then harvested my sugarcane farm, made my first bookshelf, threw some eggs at the chickens, then started mining out the roof for more space. Next, I started working on paths using the tough block variants to make a simple but nice looking path for the base. Then, I started mining out the main entrance to the bunker, which would be at the ocean, where I planned on building a nice little dock area for my handy boat. I then made a bunker central area where my bed and chests were for now, but I needed a ton more space for my item. So I started mining out a whole new area where I made a chest room to store the gazillion items that I now had. It took a while to mine out and get the resources, but I had a good amount done by the end of day 30. Day 31. I started the day off by moving the stuff from my old storage room into my new one, going back and forth for a bit till that was done. After that, I then started mining out a whole new area for a villager breeder that I planned on making very soon. The plan was to get that second villager soon to begin breeding them for a trading hall one day, but before getting too far into that, I was already crafting a bunch more chests and filling up the storage room again. But by the end of day 31, I had mined out the area where the villager breeder farm would go. I dove right into day 32 determined, mining out the floor in the breeder room, then replacing all of it with dirt, and finally tilling the dirt to prepare it for the crops. After that was done, I then went to the front of my base and began constructing the docks, mainly using stone, cobblestone, and stone bricks as my palette to texture all of this. I started by making these arched wall patterns on the front, using a design that I had used on a past server called the Leaders SMP. I then continued doing this for the rest of the day, till I noticed the sun falling down. And as the sun went down, I hopped in my boat and went out looking for zombie villager number 2. And a carrot or a potato for my villager breeder. I started fighting zombies in hope for the kinda rare drop, but I actually ended up encountering a zombie villager first. So I quickly trapped the zombie villager and brought it right back to my base to be revived. I started day 33 by heading out and harvesting my sugarcane farm. This has honestly become quite a habit. After that great harvest was done, I then went right back in my base and started brewing up the weakness potion for that zombie villager, and crafting another golden apple. And before you know it, I was splashing a weakness potion at a zombie villager once again. I then spent the rest of the day planning out a whole new sugarcane farm. So while waiting on day 34, I continued working on the new sugarcane farm and preparing for this area to be the farming section of my base. Getting all the dirt in and placing all the water. And then finally, once that was all done, placing all the sugarcane in. Right after that, I got on to mining out another new area for another new farm. This time being a new wheat farm. Now that I had fixed the crop growing issue, I reverted back to the original plan of having the wheat farm inside. So that's what I did for a while, getting all the dirt in with the water, and then tilling it all up, and then placing the wheat in. But before placing all the wheat in, I went over to break the original wheat farm. It had to go either way, really, because the docks were going to be built where it currently was. Rest in peace, old wheat farm. Rest in peace. Once that was all torn down, I started constructing the floors of the docks using a ton more stone, cobblestone, and stone bricks. And after a bit, I had a small little area constructed with a nice little railing at the waterfront. I then spent days 35 to 40 doing a ton of mining all around the base, preparing a bunch of new sections, and as you guys can see, I now have this long hallway that goes all the way around the villager breeder. This goes to the farming section. Once I got tired of being underground, I went out to the docks and continued expanding that with all the cobblestone I had smelted in the background while mining, working a bunch on the walls and the paths, and starting to texture the back of the arched walls. Of course, sticking to the stone, cobblestone, and stone brick gradient. I then started working on the stairs that would connect the docks to the house on the top of the base, keeping it simple with just stone bricks, working on this all the way till the end of day 40. Overall, by the end of day 40, I made a ton of progress on the docks and had started on the top area of it. But as the sun went down, I went back to my base and harvested my sugarcane, which of course had grown a bunch over the past few days. I then crafted all that juicy sugarcane into paper before going to bed. I started day 41, heading over to the farming area and harvesting my wheat field, which had grown a decent amount at this point. Right after harvesting that, I quickly replanted all of the seeds, and got back on the grind, mining out a giant area for my farm animals. I was starting to get tired of having all the animals at the front, so having them back here will be so much better. After finishing that up, I went out into the aisle at night, grinding out a bunch of zombies looking for a potato or carrot drop. I had a bunch of close encounters with all the zombies, with one of them even climbing up my dirt pillar and knocking me off into the other zombies. I even had this crazy encounter with this weird zombie mutated thingy, but luckily it didn't have that much health, so I took it down pretty easily. And eventually, what felt like forever, a zombie finally dropped a potato. I then quickly ran back to my base, but I heard a skeleton following me, which is why I woke up on day 42 to a skeleton trying to shoot me. I quickly dodged all his projectiles and took it down. After that was dealt with, I went over to the villager breeder and planted the potato I'd gotten last night. I then made an iron hoe and some bone meal, then began the long process of bone mealing potatoes till I fully filled this farm up with them. And after a while, I was making a tunnel to the breeder from where the villagers were to get them in, so they could begin having fun. After I got those two in, I began making the bed chamber and the area where the baby villagers would fall to right after being born. Only thing was, I needed wool for all the beds. So I went out to get some wool, but the sun started to set right as I was heading out, so I went back to base. And immediately on day 43, I went back out, but got distracted by an ocean ruin quickly, which had a buried treasure map in it. I went and got that sweet juicy loot from the chests, and it had a diamond in it. And finally, after a bit, I found an island that had a lonely sheep on it. I sheared that baby right up, then went back to base at the end of the day after not finding any more. But luckily, on day 44, I found another sheep near the impact zone. And when I got back to base, I crafted 3 beds up right away, placing the 3 of them in the villager breeder. But my friend HP Play 7 told me that 4 beds work better, so I quickly went out again and got enough wool for another bed. After I got the beds in, I continued working on the baby villager area, where I'd be storing all these guys till they turned to working age. Once the breeder was fully complete, I went over and harvested my sugarcane, then spent the rest of the day preparing to move all my farm animals. Then, from days 45 to 46, I crafted a bunch of fences and painfully and slowly moved all my animals over to their new pens. This was super annoying to do. I even ended up going across all the islands collecting a few sheep to breed them too. But by the end of day 46, I saw the breeder's first baby villager. Then, on days 47 to 49, I got back on the mining grind, beginning to mine out the room where my grand villager trading hall would eventually go. And by day 48, I had mined out the entire room, and started mining out the floor to extend the tough paths in there. And after a bit, the path went all the way from the central area right through the trading hall. I then decided to just expand the path all over the base to the farming area. This was slightly tougher as I had to widen the walls to get this part done. But after a bit, I had a nice path going throughout my entire base, even covering up the entire farm animal area. I began day 50 shoveling up some sand on the isle, as I was planning on adding a full glass design to the villager breeder. That way, we can see the fun all in action, not behind closed walls. So I smelted all that sand up real quick and placed glass for day 50. Then, on day 51, I continued replacing the stone with glass. But this time, for some unknown reason, I had to deal with the villagers trying to escape a gazillion times, making the process just that little bit longer. But once I got all the glass in, I immediately got to see the villagers in action already. I then went over to my farm animals and began feeding them for the first time in forever. And while feeding them, a few sheep tried to escape now. For some reason, everything in this base wanted to escape today. Kinda like how I want to escape this isle. But after that, I went back over to the trading hall where I continued mining out the floor and replacing it with the polished tough blocks. Then using the tough bricks to make the chambers where the villagers would eventually go for the rest of their lives. And so I just continued doing that for the rest of the day. I then spent the next few days first polishing up the design of the trading hall and trying to get all of that finished. I then crafted up a bunch of rails, and I think you guys know where this is going. Pain. But if you guys don't know, this was so I could transport all the villagers from the breeder into the trading hall so that they could begin their work life. This, of course, was extremely annoying and painful to do. I'm having PTSD looking back on this right now. But by day 54, I had gotten a bunch of fishermen ready to go. But in order to make these villagers useful, I needed a string duper, which of course works on the version that I'm playing on right now. So I began mining out a tunnel which would go to where I was going to build the duper. And after a bit and watching a tutorial, I had everything set up for this to work. So I placed the 2 tripwire hooks and attached them with string, then sheared the string and flicked the lever, causing it to start printing infinite emeralds, baby. Right away, I got a bunch of string and began training it with my fishermen. I then after that placed a bunch more rails down to get a bunch more of the villagers in. But by day 55, I had got on the other side of the trading hall filled in with villagers, who, as I said, would all become librarians for enchantments and bookshelves. So I crafted a lectern and got on the very painful break and place grind. I'm starting to notice a trend with these villagers and how they make me feel dealing with them. But to be fair, I do trap them here forever. The worst part about this is that they would take so long to take the job again after I replaced the lectern. And it was just so annoying. I'd place it and they'd take like 10 seconds to take the job back. But after a bit of torture to myself and the villagers, I was rushing for my chest with paper to lock in a beautiful mending trade I had gotten. And I also bought a bunch of bookshelves from another villager so I could begin working on my enchanting room. I spent a bit of time on day 56 placing a bunch of blocks and getting the shape down. This would be the first quadrant of 4 for the center area of the base. At first, I was just going to try and keep it simple, just have a small room with a simple level 30 enchant setup. And that's what I pretty much did, placing all the bookshelves I had bought once the room was done. But after placing everything down, I knew I could do much better than this. So I tore it all down and got back to work, mining out a much bigger area. My plans were much bigger now. I was going to make a grand library with a giant enchanting setup. So I left my base and went out into the isle, chopping down a bunch of large oak trees to get logs for the enchantment room design that I had in mind. And by the end of day 56, I had collected nearly 3 stacks of oak logs. I then spent the next 3 days constructing the base area of the library and enchanting area, placing all the logs I had collected down as a frame, then placing the bookshelves in between. I then grabbed myself some spruce stairs and trapdoors, and I placed them in between the logs too, and I tried placing them on the top and the bottom. But I didn't really like it on the top, so I removed that and only had it on the bottom part of the bookshelf. I then started mining out the room where my enchanting setup would be. Once I got a bit of it mined out, I then placed the enchant table down in the rough spot where it would be. And boom, just like that, it was day 60. I had grinded so much to get all these bookshelves so that I could make the most grand enchanting room with multiple floors and a chandelier. After that was finally done, I got back to the library area, placing some more oak logs around. And after that, mining at the floor and replacing it with some more shiny polished tuff. And by the end of day 60, the floor was fully in place. I began day 61 heading over and collecting string from the duper and trading it all away for some emeralds. I then went back up to the library and began to finish up the remaining areas that I hadn't finished up the other day. Just placing a few more logs and bookshelves, really. I then began mining out a staircase downward from the farming area. This would lead to an eventual mob grinder for level. But while mining down, I kept bumping into the ocean. This was super annoying, as I had to either change course a bunch of times or keep plugging up the holes of water. But by the end of day 61, I had made a decent amount of progress. I then spent days 62 to 65 working on building up the mob grinder. First, marking out where the rows and the holes would go. I then mined out the big main area where all the dangerous but rewarding mobs would spawn. And then mined out the rows where the water would push the mobs to their death. Once those were mined out, I then began placing the water in them, and the last thing I needed to do was place all the trapdoors in. So I went back up to my base and crafted a bunch of oak trapdoors out of the leftover wood I had from the other day. I then began placing those around the grinder so the mobs would all walk into the water cluelessly. Then lastly, I began mining the hole down 22 blocks. The only issue with this was some mobs had a lot more health than usual, so only a few mobs were actually one-shot once they fell down. I of course realized this later. I quickly made the grinder chamber and a hole with ladders to get in and out. And after that was all said and done, I went into the grinder to take down all the torches so that the mobs would begin to spawn. Once all torches were taken down, I sealed it all up. And then from day 65 to 68, I decided to go AFK for a few days to test and see how much XP I could get from it. That's when I realized my mistake, which I explained earlier. But by day 68, I got a pretty decent amount of levels and was ready to begin using my fancy enchanting setup. I then started the nicest day of these 100 days unloading my inventory into my chests, and then going down to my mines to grab myself some lapis lazuli. After a little bit of strip mining, I eventually found that lapis, and quickly returned back to my base to begin enchanting. First, enchanting my pickaxe and getting efficiency 4 and fortune 3. Not bad at all. But I only got unbreaking on my sword, so I went and quickly crafted up a grindstone, disenchanting that sword right away. I then got unlucky on my sword again, quickly disenchanting that. Then unlucky with my shovel, so I disenchant that. You guys know the drill now, so guess what happened on my chest plate. After disenchanting that, I was at a level, so I went back down to the mob grinder for the rest of the day. I then went back to the enchantment table on day 70, quickly grabbing myself prot 4 on my chest plate, and then prot 4 and unbreaking 3 on my leggings. But I then got fire prot 4 on my boots, so you know what happened to those. By that point, it was already the end of day 70, so I went to bed. I then began day 71 collecting an inventory's worth of string from the duper, and depositing all those potential emeralds into my chests. After that, I began mining out my future portal room, which was right beside my chest room. And after a bit, I had mined a decent amount, but my newly enchanted pig was about to break. So I went over to the trading hall and collected a few mending books to put on my gear and tools. I then crafted this world's first ever anvil and put mending on my pickaxe, my chest plate, and my leggings. And after that, I went right down to the mob grinder to start repairing my pickaxe. And by day 72, my pick had healed up a decent amount, but I was starting to get tired of using this thing. So I went back up a little early and continued mining out the portal room. And once that was done, I was going to go grab some obsidian from that lava pool. But then I remembered I still had a bunch of leftovers from the Nether fortress. So I grabbed all that obsidian and started building a brand new big Nether portal in the new room. I tried lighting the portal up, but there was a torch there, so it didn't work the first time. But I quickly got rid of that and lit the portal up. And thank goodness it connected with the other side and didn't spawn me in a random location. After that was verified, I got back on the grind again, mining out the floor to continue the path right up to the portal, continuing the same design. And after that, I started working on the walls. I decided to go with something similar to what I did on the docks, but with tuff, using that arched wall design. This design worked really well with the tuff blocks in my opinion. So for the next few days, I continued working on this portal room, getting each part of it done bit by bit. First working on the walls all around, then finishing up the floors to the side of the main path, and then finishing off the ceiling, trying to keep it simple but nice looking. After that room was done, I went to my chest and collected all the tuff I had left over, and I went over to my trading hall to finish up decorating in there. I first did the wall right over by the string duper, polishing that side up with more tuff and giving it a sleek and modern design. I planned on using the area above the villagers for a zombie conversion thing, but before doing that, I mined out and started working on the roof, just mirroring the floor with the blocks and patterns for the rest of the day. I began day 75, heading over to the beach of the isle and collecting a bunch more sand for the zombie viewing area. Once I got all the sand, I then went and put that all in the furnace to cook up, and soon after that, I started placing all that glass along the walls, and it actually ended up looking pretty decent despite being unfinished. I never even ended up getting a zombie up there during these 100 days. I then put in the final bits and touches into this trading hall and then went over to my chest room to finally finish it up all these weeks later. I mined out the other side and filled it up completely with chests, giving me much more storage than I need and mirroring the original side. This storage room was really just meant to be an aesthetic pleaser. Then, from days 76 to 85, I put full focus on polishing up my base. First getting a roof in my storage room, then doing a bit of mining, but soon after harvesting my crops and feeding the animal, I then crafted the leftovers into bread and got back to work on the next quadrant in the main area, which would be me and my pet Trim's room. Once that was done, I moved my bed out of the center into there and reset my spawn. I then got back to mining near the villager breeder and working on that area a lot, getting proper walls, ceilings, and stairs all in there. It was mainly annoying polishing the villager breeder because, of course, the annoying villagers around there and having to mine and place blocks all around them. But overall, I did a bit of everything across the entire base really, and by day 85 I had a nearly complete bunker already, as I walked around in awe of the amount of progress that had been made. But now it was time to get some ender pearls. So I quickly crafted up a jungle boat and dove right into the Nether. And right away went straight to a warp forest, no distractions this time around. I then went around the warp forest and began farming endermen for their shiny pearls. And after a bit of hunting around, I collected 15 shiny pearls. But on the way back I had to use one in a near-death experience. On day 86, I tried enchanting my sword again, but got smite 4. Yay. So I went back down to the mob grinder and spent the next few days there. So by day 90, I went back up to my enchant table and hit the jackpot with sharp 4, sweeping edge 3, knockback 2, and unbreaking 3, all in one enchant. I then got unlucky on both my boots and my helmet, getting prot 3 and fire prot again. But I eventually got prot 4 on my helmet by the end of day 90. I then started day 91, grabbing some string and turning that into another 2 mending books, which I then quickly placed on my OP sword and my beautifully enchanted helmet. I then grabbed my blaze rod, which I got at the fortress weeks ago, and turned it into blaze powder, and crafted 15 beautiful eyes of ender. The end is near. I then put all the leftovers away and went to harvest my wheat and sugarcane farm, which had grown a lot again, and then crafted all that wheat into bread. I then spent the next few days adding in all the final bits and touches around the base. First, making a new mine entrance with a similar design to the other quadrant rooms, and adding in a brand new staircase to go down to the mine. And after that, I built the room for the final quadrant, but it was going to be empty. This was because this room was supposed to be a lab to study the weird mobs on this isle, but I was running out of time, so I had to scrap that unfortunately. I then took a look at the final bit of the roof and decided I was going to punch a big hole through it to let some sunlight in. But before doing that, I finished off the roof and all the other quadrants, keeping it simple with a polished tuff slab roof, with a polished tuff stair trim along the border. But in between, I ran out of tuff surprisingly, so I went down to the mines for a bit to get some more, and came back up to finish the job, starting to mine out that giant hole too. And by the end of day 94, I had mined that hole in the roof and was preparing it for a glass see-through layer. And on day 95, I got the glass and filled in the hole with it. It was beautiful. But before I could call this bunker done, I went to the front of the base and started building a cool bunker door using iron doors and levers to get in and out. The door matched perfectly in my opinion. Once that was all done, I went down to the mob grinder for the rest of the day to repair my tools. I then began day 96 by heading to my enchanting room and getting power 4 on my bow, and then putting a flame book on it that I had for some extra insurance. And after that, put a spare soul speed book onto my boots as a joke. Then right away, I went down into my mines underneath the island to begin looking for the stronghold. After a bit of mining, I finally found the stronghold, and I entered this room with a bunch of chairs, and I found a chest with a bunch of food in. This stronghold had looked way different than anything I'd ever seen before. I even founded this giant library, which would have been very useful earlier. I then found a gravestone that was being guarded by a skeleton, so I killed the skeleton, got the loot in there. There's this really cool banner with a sword on it, so I took it down and put it onto my shield. After a bit, I then found this giant weird ender dragon worship room that looked like it had some deep lore to it with all the dragon heads around. But after a bit of exploration, I finally found the portal. So I broke the spawner and lit the portal right up. I wasted no time hopping in to fight the dragon. When I spawned in, I was in this weird cage. And as I was approaching the middle area, I kept hearing these weird bell sounds. The end looked absolutely insane, and when I got to the middle, the Ender Dragon spawning ritual started, and the bell sounds got louder. Beams shot up from the middle as each crystal, one by one, spawned in. And once all were spawned in, they all worked in unison to spawn the Ender Dragon in. The fight was on. Right off the bat, I got right to work, taking out each crystal, a few with my bow. Of course, missing tons of shots. And then building up to a few crystals too to break them and have better vantage points for the other ones. Things were going pretty well so far. I did have a close encounter with Dragon's Breath where it knocked me off the tower, but I survived. But soon after, I got the last crystal and started fighting the beast itself. Due to the building in the middle of the island, it was really hard to get an opening onto the dragon, and the hitbox was kind of messed up, but I was able to find spots and get tons of hits in. As the first cycle ended though, the dragon sent me flying into the air, but luckily it sent me right to the top of an end pillar. I then continued fighting the dragon, trying to get hits in on it, and finally hitting it with a bow, realizing that was the first monster I actually hit with an arrow. And soon after, I had a near close encounter with an enderman, but luckily was able to take it down. Then on the dawn of day 97, I started getting a ton of critical hits in on the dragon, getting it down to 1 HP as it flew off. I was going to finish it off with my bow, but I realized that I'd missed so many shots that I was already out of arrows, so I waited for it to perch again. As it began to perch, I enderpearled right over and finished the dragon off, taking it down once and for all. And there I stood atop the building in the center of the end, victorious. victorious and proud I was able to survive with the circumstances I was put in. I went down and collected the dragon egg, and then I of course angered an enderman as a joke, and then jumped into the portal. I quickly came back up to my base and reset my spawn again, and I did a victory lap around my base. What a journey this has been. Then, from days 97 to 99, I spent the time adding the final bits and touches to this bunker, fully finishing up all layers and areas of the docks and fully connecting it with the house on the top. And on day 99, I began to pack my gear, only taking the things I thought I would need for my journey back to civilization. I wanted to leave a bunch of the stuff here for a potential future castaway to make it easier for them than it was for me. Once packed up, I began writing the story you guys are all watching right now. And by the end of day 99, I had finished writing the book, but before going to bed, I watched the sun go down under the ocean, and then going to sleep in my bed one last time on this isle. I woke up excited on day 100, quickly grabbing Drim, and taking one last look around this bunker. I was a little sad as I had called this place home for the past few months, but I needed to return home to civilization. So I took my last look around in and left the bunker, closing the door behind me so it wouldn't be overrun with monsters. I was then on the docks, standing there taking my last few looks back at the walls, at the house, thinking of the past 100 days and all that I had accomplished. Hello everyone, if you made it through this entire video, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. This video was a lot of fun to record. I'm planning on doing a bunch more 100 days content soon and other stuff, so let me know what you guys want to see next and please consider subscribing. Goodbye everyone.